It is time to talk about Jujutsu Kaisen Chapter 247, and I know I am like a month late on this one, but better late than never. And as far as chapters of 2023 are concerned, I think this is one of the best of last year. So let's get into it, because at the end of Chapter 246, we saw that Higuruma finally learned how to use domain amplification. And Sukuna directly compares Higuruma to Gojo as an incredible prodigy of Jujutsu. And this statement gets expanded on in this chapter, and we find out just why Higuruma is so impressive to Sukuna. Where Sukuna says that Higuruma's ability to maintain his technique with domain amp is on par with his own. And Sukuna comparing someone to himself, that is pretty much unprecedented praise from this guy, so Higuruma, he really is the real deal. Or I should say he was, because he certainly popped off, but he also got popped, but we'll get to that. And this leads into a pretty interesting line from Sukuna where he tries to remember Higuruma's name and he says, "Oh, you're Higuruma Hiromi, right?" And it's just funny to me that Sukuna can barely be bothered to remember your name until he finds out if you're powerful. And Sukuna makes some hand signs and he just dumpsters the whole building before we see Yuji show up because he was in pursuit of Sukuna last chapter. Yuji tries to do his Yuji things, but Sukuna gives him a little pat and just bisects a part of his body. And Sukuna gives him some pretty brutal dialogue where he says, "Take a long look in the mirror, brat. There's not an interesting bone in that body." And if the theories about Yuji and Sukuna being related and Sukuna's self-hatred are true, well, here's more pudding for that proof. And it looked like Yuji kind of just plummeted into the earth like a rocket here, but we don't really have time to worry about that because Higuruma is once again all by himself. And we get the now infamous scene where Higuruma does his little fencing tricks and then gets his arms meticulously cut off by Sukuna one by one, all in a grand effort by Sukuna to get Higuruma to finally showcase RCT. And in another controversial scene, we see Choso shoot a piercing blood at Sukuna. Sukuna deflects it and takes note that this is the technique of the oldest Curse Moon brother, but let's be real, it's probably Yuji. Yuji is the only one that we know is in the vicinity. Granted, piercing blood can travel pretty far. Still, I just don't see the problem in giving Yuji piercing blood at this point or blood manipulation. And it's already heavily implied he ate the curse wound, so just giving him the blood manipulation, that seems like a pretty reasonable power-up. But immediately after this, Higuruma learns RCT on the spot and gets a jab in on Sukuna's hand with the Executioner's Sword. But last second, Sukuna chops his own hand off right before the Executioner's Sword impaled him, because of course he did. And Sukuna needlessly bullies Higuruma about this and says, "Nice shot, I suppose. I mean, is that really necessary? He grew his arms back just like you asked. I mean, come on, like, just give him a fucking break." But just like with Yuji, Sukuna places his hand on Higuruma and bisects his gut. And we get a very short flashback of Higuruma asking Kusakabe if curses get stronger after death. And he says that this fits their current understanding of curses. And when I first read this, I did wonder about Sukuna, because we do get the information that Sukuna is somebody who has experienced death before. And while Sukuna is not literally a cursed spirit, he's also not entirely human either. I mean, just look at him. So I wonder if that experience of death and whatever he did with Jujutsu to come back, if that's responsible for his current power level. And it sounds like here that Higuruma's entire plan was to die and make his Executioner's Sword or his curse technique even stronger. So we can get the reveal that Yuji is right behind Sukuna and he has a PTSD flashback of Nanami saying, "You have it from here," and he grabs the Executioner's Sword and tries to stab Sukuna. And that is the cliffhanger we were left on for like a month, and it's almost over while I'm making this video, but man, it has felt like an eternity. And as for how is Yuji okay, or not gutted, because it looked like he kinda got his gut shredded. Does Yuji Itadori finally have RCT? I don't think that's entirely unreasonable. I mean, RCT just isn't that overpowered anymore in this series. It's actually more so necessary to live. And it's even kind of hard to tell on the last page if he is actually healed or not, because the page, I don't want to say the art's bad, but it is stylized, so it's kind of difficult to read. At least if you're trying to power skill Yuji or something, and a lot of people are arguing about this, but I don't really see the point, because this isn't exactly a mystery. You're gonna know by next chapter. And as for next chapter, is this the end of Ryomen Sukuna? Will he finally fall to the blade of Yuji and Higuruma? The answer is no. The 3v1 of the heavy hitters, maybe 4v1 of the heavy hitters and Yuji versus Sukuna, that is coming, and Maki is still missing. But the longer this fight goes on, the more and more it feels like Sukuna just has no real way of losing this, and the actual climax here is going to be the merger. because whatever Yuji's power-up is, whatever the other characters have in store for Sukuna, I just doubt it's going to work because this guy's technique is still hidden, and that is just a trump card waiting to happen. You know, maybe that's a hot take, but I just don't think that giving Yuji a blood squirt gun is going to fix anything. The true power-up of Yuji and the climax to this entire scenario right now, it just seems to be the merger. For the longest time, I figured the merger was just some giant red herring, and I still think it kind of is, but the actual event occurring, I'm kind of sold on that. As for Yuji, the ongoing theory I've been hearing come up a lot more is that he is going to be the vessel of the merger creature. And personally, I'm on board with that. If that's how he gets as strong as Sukuna or just gets stronger in general, I am down for it. It seems like one of the least goofy ways for him to get powerful, and it kind of fits into Kenjaku's whole scheme and him having his will be passed on. Some people think this meant that he's going to take over Yuta's body, but him 1v1ing Yuta as a brain, I just don't see that happening. If Kenjaku is actually able to body the strongest version of Yuta post-time skip as a head, I mean, he's just a god, and that's all there is to it. And speaking of gods, when Sukuna slithers his way out of this Executioner's Sword, which is pretty much what everybody thinks is going to happen, I'm guessing Maki will show up shortly after that, reveal herself, and then we'll get all three of them group up, have their big fight with the heavy hitters against Sukuna, and then he will reveal his technique and body somebody. Hikari and Yuta have the biggest death flags, and Maki does have a finished character arc, but her character arc kind of hinges on her being alive. And by that I mean my sacrifice for Maki was that she could carry her legacy as a weapon, both literally and figuratively, against the Zenin family and just Jujutsu as a whole. And I feel like that's partially nullified if Maki just bites it like a month later, but she did already kill the Zenin family, so I wouldn't rule it out entirely. I just lean more towards Hikari and Yuta. And regardless of who it is, some fanboys are going to be mad no matter what. And we have now entered 2024, and I'm pretty sure this is going to be the first video of 2024 for me, and JJK is allegedly ending this year. I say allegedly because Gege Akutame has said things like this before, that they plan to end in a certain time period, and really no author actually knows when their story is going to be finished. My prediction here though is that JJK is probably going to go into like 2025, at least early 2025, and if it does end in 2024, it's going to be like November, December. And I really hope we get to see more of the Heian era before the series is over, because if JJK ends and we just don't ever get to see an actual flashback of this time period, it's going to be a little bit of a missed opportunity. Even with the information we do have on the lore of JJK, I think that Gege Akutame has done an excellent job at world building. And I feel like a huge part of that is that there are so many major historical figures in JJK that just never interact with each other. Sukuna has been dead for 1,000 years, and in that time period, he was not the sole focus of the world. Sukuna is nowhere to be found in JJK 0 because Sukuna is a finger, or multiple fingers, or effectively dead. And even during the time period of Sukuna, while he was the most powerful, the world did not hinge on him. Other factions were still fighting each other. And it's little things like that that make a world feel lived in, and I think Naruto did a pretty good job of this in part 1 as well. And even halfway through part 2, where the other ninja villages really felt like they had their own national interests. So overall, I am hoping we get to see a Heian Era Flashback, and hopefully more spin-offs of JJK even if it does end. And now that season 2 of the anime is over, a lot more people are going to pick up the manga, and Jujutsu Kaisen really is the hottest anime on the block right now. And because of that, I really hope that Gege seizes the opportunity and gives us a bit more backstory. But those are my overall thoughts on the state of Jujutsu Kaisen and Chapter 247. I promised I would get this video out, and I know it is incredibly late, but we're going to be back for 248. And I also want to say thank you all for the support you showed this channel in 2023. I never expected this much, and it's been a privilege to get to talk about JJK online, so thank you. And if you like content like this, subscribe for more. And as always, thanks for watching.